This is a true story. First, some background. Mantua, Ohio is a railroad town boasting a creepy town center with an old railway station, surrounded by a rural landscape peppered with brick buildings, sprawling properties with dense woods and cornfields, guarded by sunny farmhouses of varying age and size. 44 South runs one lane in each direction. I made this drive regularly to visit my then-boyfriend. Familiar with the area, I would usually have music on, enjoying the drive and the fresh air. One day in the middle of summer in 2011, I was driving on 44 South into Mantua, making my usual trip in the mid-afternoon on a beautiful, clear day. I passed a quiet area just a few miles from my destination. On the right, houses on 2 to 3 acre lots with big front yards, longer driveways and attached garages shaded by tall trees with thick foliage and backyards full of dense woods. On the left, across the road, there is a cornfield bordered by a deep grassy drainage culvert, stretching several miles long. I see something that looks off up ahead. It's hard to make out, but there's something on the opposite side of the road where the cornfields are. It's a ways off and hard to make out, but it's clearly a large brown hairy mass right next to the road. It's too dark in color to be a dead deer. Maybe an escaped cow? No, not that either. Something about this mass on the side of the road is unlike anything I've ever seen, and I just can't figure it out because I keep having to look back at the road. I see it move. Maybe whatever it is isn't roadkill and it's just an animal grazing on the side of the road in the culvert. I rolled my window down to get a better look. I slow down a little as I pass by, and all at once I realize what I'm seeing. The hairy mass is a dead dog, being eaten by another dog. The biggest dog I've ever seen with the freakiest, emptiest eyes. As I pass by, this thing pulls its face out of the dog carcass it's eating to look up at my car and lock eyes with me. They looked right through me, and it felt like what I can only describe as pure evil. I pass it in my car at about 40 miles per hour. As I start to freak out and roll up my window, I check my mirror for a double take because I absolutely do not believe what I saw, and I see that its head is already back down again, eating and out of view with no other defining features. It was totally unbothered by my car. I slow down, then speed up, then slow down, then speed up again. I want to know what I saw, but I completely freak out. I look for the nearest driveway on my right side, maybe 50 to 75 yards away, and peel into the driveway to turn around and go back. As I put my car in park, I see that a man is home and is sitting in a lawn chair outside his garage facing parallel to the road, blissfully unaware of what's just up the road behind him while his 2 Labradors amble around him. He sees me and assumes I'm just using his driveway to turn around, but is unsettled when I drove almost all the way up the driveway, park my car and get out, still freaking out. "Take your dogs inside. You need to get inside your house." I tell him what I saw, and he gets up out of his lawn chair to look where I'm pointing, but the trees at the edge of his property block the scene from view, and it's just a bit too far. I get back in my car and keep warning him to get his dogs inside. If our places had been exchanged, I probably would have called the cops on someone who came ripping into my driveway, rambling about some wild animal in a panic. I was terrified and full of adrenaline with no regard for ruining this guy's peaceful afternoon. I don't remember how I left it with him, but I got back in my car, backed out onto 44, and headed back north from the way I came to get a better look at this thing, still from the safety of my moving car. I pass where it was and it's gone. I drive back and forth one more time in disbelief at the whole thing, further back than I thought to be safe, thinking I'd underestimated the distance between the carcass and the house I stopped at. But there was a hole in the corn where whatever this thing was had clearly drugged the dog it was eating to finish away from the road. I remember sitting and stopping on the side of the road after turning around again and heading back south, looking across the road at this hole in the corn that looked far too innocent to do justice to what I had just seen. No one driving by would even notice it. I had my head on a swivel around my car and locked my doors, but something told me I wouldn't see it again and to get out of there, so I did. When I passed the house again, the man and dogs weren't in the yard anymore, and the garage was closed. Completely rattled, I called my then-boyfriend, whose house I was headed to, as I drove away, but if I remember correctly, he didn't answer. When I got there, I was so shaken up and couldn't make sense of what I had seen. This was right after high school, and he still lived with his folks in a cold, creaky farmhouse in Ravenna they had just moved into, and I did not feel safe in that house that night. It brought back all my childhood fears of being afraid of the dark and what was under the bed, like it could be anywhere, I remember this like it was yesterday, and even though I've shared this story with a few friends, I've never written it down. Whatever this was built like a dog, but bigger than any dog I've ever seen. It was very dark brown with dirty hair. I've considered that it might have been a black bear with mange, but even though I only got a quick glimpse, it didn't move like a bear. And the piercing eyes in broad daylight, those were something else. It was canine, not Bigfoot or any other common myth that I'm aware of. Maybe someone here will know. I haven't done too much research into what it could be because I think part of me is scared to know what it could be. Black dog? Werewolf? I have no idea. It was big, at least 200 pounds, maybe bigger. For months I couldn't stop thinking about it, and it still scares and disturbs me to tell the story. There's weird stuff out there in the rural Midwest. Have any other skeptics ever seen something like this in the backwoods of the Midwest? This is a true story from about 20 years ago or so. I had been living in the San Francisco Bay Area, but originally from the East Coast, and had never been truly camping. My girlfriend at the time was from California and was used to camping, so I went with her a few times. This was my first time with her, and her young 5-year-old son came with us to Big Sur. It was cool and it had been rainy, but that night it was just misty and cold when we arrived. We drove to one of those camp places that had a small parking lot, which was empty except for us. So we set up the tent a little bit from the car and proceeded to try and get a fire started, and she got mad because she asked me to get things started and I had no idea what to do. Anyhow, we got the fire started. It was cold and wet, and after eating, we all crammed into a 2-person tent. Neither of us were gun owners, but I had brought a small knife and mini baseball bat just in case because I was not really comfortable camping. In the middle of the night, I was awoken by something walking slowly around the tent. I was so scared that I couldn't figure out if it was 2 or 4-legged. I didn't hear any other sound, except what sounded like something trying not to sound too loud, at least in my mind. This went on for what seemed like 10 or 15 minutes, and I was scared shitless, and didn't move but kept my hand on the bat next to me. I remember assuming it was a bear or mountain lion, which I had no experience with. Eventually it sounded like it walked away slowly, but I wasn't really able to get much sleep. At first sunlight, I slowly got out of the tent and sat on a park bench that was near us. After a little time, I saw someone walking through the woods towards me, which again scared me as we had seen no one since being there. Eventually, I see that it is a ranger or police officer, and he seems to have his hand on or near his holster. I am wearing camo pants, have a beard, and look pretty scruffy, and I am a bit worried because I have some weed on me and the knife and bat. He asked me my name, what I am doing there, and I explained that I am with my girlfriend and her son who are still in the tent. After checking my ID and seeing them, he told us that there had been reports of a crazy guy going around and attacking campers in the area, and to be careful and think about leaving the area, which we did, because the weather sucked anyway. As it had been raining, there were no prints or other signs of what was walking around us, but it was scary for me, a city guy, not knowing if it was an animal or crazy man, and I was super hesitant to go camping for a bit after that. I'll start this off by saying I grew up completely 100% adamant that the paranormal isn't real, it can all be rationalized, and that people who believed in it haven't thought about it hard enough. I live in the Midwest on a small rural lot between a cornfield and a small forest in a camper. I've lived in this county my entire life. I know the entire county like the back of my hand. This being said, I've come to the conclusion that my experiences around the rural and wooded parts of this county are crawlers. I'm 100% sure of it. I've had many encounters actually, none back to back, but they happen frequently. There is a forest/park in the middle of the town I've always hated at night since I was little. As I got older, my cousin and I thought getting scared was really fun. We'd go there at night on purpose, but never lasted long. I always felt like I was being watched. This, on top of urban legends of people going missing here at night, made me feel really uneasy. Fast forward to a few years ago, I got married and am settling into life as a husband. I would take my large, all-black German Shepherd Fenrir on walks with me at night. I always walk towards the park, but I usually don't enter into it. The first time something weird happened was 5 years ago. I was walking Fenrir, and the woods to the front and to the right of me went silent. My dog started acting super anxious. He's usually a very stoic and quiet dog. He's 120 pounds and built like a tank, looks very intimidating, and he knows it. I heard rustling in the woods following me, and I felt like I was being stalked. I ran home, and that's the end of the first encounter. I had a few more encounters like that, but last year things really amped up. I was on a walk around 11:30 p.m. with Fenrir, my wife, and our little newer dog, Booger. He's a terrier chimix. We are walking down the same path, and about 3 blocks away from the woods, 4 or so deer are sprinting out of the trees into the street towards us, and they seem terrified. Then I hear what I can only describe as what sounded like a human trying to mimic the sounds of a monkey. I thought it was silly until recently when I read that other guy's story who heard the same damn thing. We laughed it off as some kids playing around. Once we get up to the woods and are walking parallel, we can clearly see 2 reflective eyes and a silhouette staring us down from the tree line. We also heard a deep growl, and then what sounded like a hissing sound, but it wasn't super high-pitched or anything. Both our dogs acknowledged this as well. Finn stared and Booger growled a bit. I made a Facebook post on the community Facebook group, and other people told similar stories around town. Around this time, I got a job as a tour guide, maintenance worker for Rail Explorers. I am working there again this year as well. We start April 1st. Basically, they take unused or tour specific railroad sections that aren't used federally, and they have these pedal carts with motor assist on them you can use to explore the tracks. It's super cool and super fun. The one I work at is like 5 minutes from where I live, and it goes through the woods in an inaccessible part of the county unless you float down the river and hike up steep loose dirt hills. You go under one old car bridge, and you go over 2 multi-100-foot-length old train bridges. The first one is larger and taller, and it's about 150 feet off the ground above the forest. The second goes over the river. About 6 months into the job, and it's fall, we work until midnight sometimes, with the last tour leaving around 9 p.m. That means the last tour for the last 2 months of the year are in complete darkness. The way that job operates is with 6 employees. 4 get on the lead bike and 2 get on the rear bike. From the lead bike, we drop off 1 person at the busy intersection so they can flag traffic, and 1 person gets dropped off at the large train bridge that goes over the woods. The person at the bridge gives a short safety speech to the customers who stop and go one at a time over the bridge. The employee carts are much faster than the customer ones. We all have walkie-talkies, and we usually have these battery-powered floodlights on stands we use so the customers can see us, and there are the light-up safety vests. On one particular night, we were behind by 20 or so minutes. Instead of leaving the depot at sunset, we were leaving at dusk. I was stationed at the high bridge. By the time we reached the bridge, it was pitch black, aside from the stars providing a little light. My co-workers dropped me off and waited with me until the first customer arrived. I gave the little speech to that first cart of 4 and chatted with them a little bit. I was trying to buy some time and wait for the next customer cart so there wasn't a massive gap for my coworkers who have to flip the bikes around. After a few minutes, I let these customers leave, and I was alone. I was alone for 20 minutes. I used the radio Sue many times, but it was static for everybody. It was one of the only times we've ever had an issue like that as well. I kept seeing movement in the tree line. I kept hearing fast footsteps all around me in every direction. I had the floodlight on above my head so everyone and everything could see me, but I couldn't see anything. I turned off the floodlight and used my personal flashlight. I kept seeing quick glimpses of pale skin moving quickly, but right when I started seeing stuff, I could hear the next customer cart coming close, so I turned the light back on and waited for them to come around the corner. When they pulled up, I noticed they had a little boy with them, and he's scared of the dark. I'm terrified at this point, but have to act appropriately, even more so because of this boy. I do not want to scare him. As I'm finishing my speech, I hear movement right behind me and spin around with my flashlight on instinct. Poor kid, I told them it was probably just a deer and they are good to go across the bridge. That same night, a Native American man was stationed at the intersection right next to a massive cornfield and was very in tune with his culture. He told me privately a few weeks later that he heard rustling in the cornfield and whatever was out there was whispering his name and trying to get him into the field. He was also without communication for those 20 minutes, but he wasn't in the woods and could see a lot better than me. Another time, me and that same co-worker were headed back on the front cart. We were a ways ahead, so we stopped the cart in the middle of the high bridge. It was a clear night and we were watching the stars and having small talk. Then it goes silent. We are 100 and so feet in the air above the woods. We can hear for miles. The dogs barking across the river 2 miles can be heard without even seeing the houses. We hear what sounds like a human mimicking a monkey noise, and we hear growling. He looks at me completely serious and tells me in a stern tone that we need to get out of here right now. I drive the hell out of there, and he moved to Nevada shortly after this. A few months go by, and it's late fall, around the middle of November. I drive through that park in town a lot when I just want to go for a drive. I had my dog Fenrir with me, and it's around 2 a.m. I can't sleep, so I'm listening to a Melvin CD and driving leisurely through the park. As soon as I pass the entrance gate, I feel really uneasy and weird. I'm not easily scared. Going to that park at night makes me feel a primal fear. It's beyond fight or flight. I have never felt that way in my life anywhere else, and I feel it every time I'm there. I'm driving through the park, and I've rolled the windows up a lot more. Fenrir can still poke his head out, but can't leap out. As I go deeper into the woods, I feel worse and worse. I decided not to turn around because I'm already past the halfway point, and turning around would make me stay in the woods longer. I started speeding where there weren't any turns I couldn't see around. I round the last corner, and what I saw made me have nightmares for months. There was a pale, skinny humanoid figure, tall and lanky, not quite human. Damn thing was crawling on its hands and feet, but it was crawling very fast. 20 miles per hour type crap. We don't have bears here. The only animals that size are large humans and deer. That wasn't a deer. It went from my right, crossed the street, and went into the tree line. Fenrir saw it too, and he doesn't bark at animals. Not even other dogs. He went ballistic. He was trying to force himself out of the small gap in the window, nearly foaming at the mouth and snarling. He never, ever acts like that. I'm a certified dog trainer, and I've raised him from birth. Most recently, I've become obsessed with this park. I've walked there at night from my camper to the park with Fenrir. I'll never do it again. I didn't see a figure this time. As I was entering the park, a massive owl flew by my head so close I could have smacked it mid-flight. This made me feel weird for some reason. As soon as I get into the park, I feel extremely weird, anxious, and nauseous. I walk a few hundred yards to the only streetlight in the entire park, and I turn around and face the woods. Me and Fenrir stand there, frozen for like 10 minutes. The silence was deafening. Any time I heard anything, I'd jump. Finn was anxious as hell too. He kept staring into a certain spot in the woods a ways off. I swear I saw eyes in there every once in a while. I built up the courage to walk out, and I haven't gone back since. It'll be interesting to see what happens at my job this year. I wanted to add that the county I live in is packed full of abandoned mines, hundreds of them. I live in rural Southwest Virginia, in Appalachia, and heard odd whistling in the woods a few nights ago. It started when I was playing airsoft alone in the woods at about 7 p.m. in almost pitch black, and was walking around the woods behind my house. I got to a clearing just on top of a hill, and sat down to take a rest. Just when I sat down, I heard odd whistling. It was perfect whistling, and whistled a tune I had never heard before. It was clear, and it sounded close, within 150 feet or less, and came directly from behind me. It had to be in the woods, and near the property line with one of our neighbors. It instantly gave me chills down my back, and I got the feeling of being watched. I, not being an idiot and having a brain, wasted no time in sprinting full speed down towards my house, hopping over rocks and limbs. The whistling stopped shortly after I got moving, but I still felt like I was being watched, and like something was off. I didn't see anything when I turned back to look while opening a gate, but that may be because of the darkness and the distance I had moved. I don't think it was a bird, as the leaves on the trees haven't regrown yet, and it still stays cold at night and sometimes during the day, but I don't know much about birds. There were also no birds to be seen, and everything else was quiet. I also doubt it was a person, as I heard no talking, no leaves crunching, no talking, and no other noises. I should also mention the whistling started out of nowhere, and did not gradually get louder, as if someone or something was moving closer while whistling. I should also mention that I've been in those woods a decent amount of my life, and have never heard anything like it before, not even once. I was a bit tired, but I've been more tired before while being up in those woods at similar times before, and I'm not one to hallucinate. The situation still gives me chills when I think about it. I've had the feeling of being watched before in those woods, but those feelings have never been so intense and extreme as that one night. I was hoping someone knew what it was. Was it an animal? Maybe, but my family and I have dogs around the house, and most wild animals stay away, and I haven't really seen anything outside of a bear or two and deer in those woods. I should also mention that dogs occasionally bark randomly into the woods, but they weren't really barking at the moment when the whistling happened. I was hoping anyone could identify what it was, and I'm not saying it was paranormal, but I'm not saying it was just a wild animal. My 3-year-old son suffered from chronic ear infections last year, which led to him having high fevers. I slept with him on this particular night because I needed to give him Tylenol throughout the night to keep his fever down and keep him comfortable. I set my alarm to wake me up at around 2:30 a.m. When I woke up, I went into the kitchen to get the Tylenol. I noticed a bright light shining into the apartment from our deck door, which also illuminated part of the woods behind the apartment. When I went over to see what it was, it turned out to be a car with those bright LED headlights in the parking lot to the far back right of the apartment. I figured they were dropping someone off. I saw the movement of what resembled a dog walking around near the woods. I started to think that the lady who usually walks her dog, a cute little corgi in that area, purposely faced her car in that direction so she could see while she walked her dog. As it got closer, I realized there was nobody out there walking a dog, and there was no dog. I don't know what it was that I saw, but I'll describe it in the best way I can. At first it looked just like a dog, corgi size, but as it walked closer it looked like your average house cat. Then it looked like a black bear, and then it looked like a koala. I live in North New Jersey, and there are no wild koalas here. At this point my heart is pounding out of my chest, and I am scared. The fear I felt was like a primal type of fear I have never felt before. I ran to my bedroom to wake up my boyfriend, and I shook him awake very roughly. I said, "You gotta come see this." He was a bit annoyed with me. When we look outside together, we see this thing getting closer, and it looks like a skunk now. White stripe down the center with the perky, fluffy tail. I said, "Oh, it's just a skunk," with a little chuckle. I felt a bit embarrassed that I woke him up over a damn skunk, but at that moment I also felt relieved. However, I was mistaken. As it walked, it looked as if it was struggling to find a form. I thought it looked like it was falling apart, but also coming back together again at the same time. I know this doesn't make sense, but it's hard to find the words for what we saw. After the skunk formation, it looked like a person crawling on the ground with some type of fur or skin attached to them around the leg. Then it changed again and looked like a raccoon, groundhog, a black bear, a cat, a koala, a deer, and a skunk. The part that stuck out to me the most was that whatever it was seemed to be coming apart or shedding, but at the same time it was growing. Whoever had their headlights on turned them off as it went deeper into the woods. This happened pretty quickly. I'd say it was only about a couple of minutes from start to finish. He ended up going back to bed, but I couldn't sleep after that. So I grabbed a flashlight and shined it into the woods to see if I could see it again, but it was gone. I also opened the door to see if I could hear anything, but I couldn't. It was very quiet. I had a very hard time going back to sleep that night. My boyfriend wasn't scared, but he was confused and stunned. He didn't know what to make of it. I was scared and creeped out. I know if I hadn't woken him up to see it for himself, he most likely wouldn't believe me and would have chalked it all up to me being groggy from just waking up or it just being an animal. Unfortunately, I know what I saw and I'll never forget it.